Let's do it.
Donk Nation, Jackson, Janet's greetings and welcome to your Daily Dose of Donkey with Ginger. It's your boy, the Viking Donkey, coming to you with some off-season Steelers talk. Gingy's in the house. Gingy, it's time to make those takes that make us look like geniuses or like the dumbest people in the world. So let's go ahead. Let's start off-season hype train or off-season fall off the cliff train. Gingy, welcome to it. How you doing?
Nonsensical, Mutant Gingy in the house. Wow. Donkey. This week, more. Okay, so we got an Arthur Smith, right? Run. We got a Najee Harris, right?
Mm-hmm.
But do we? And why not? And what's going on? We got people wanting out. We just got over this, Donkey. What am I always talking about with off-season chemistry in the locker room?
That's what you said, and there's been a lot of people hyping up how Russell Wilson's going to save this franchise and put people on his back, but I will admit, kind of odd to hear quiet out of Najee Harris on this whole front. A little weird. George Pickens hasn't really worked out with him yet. Pat Freiermuth was there, but woo, a tight end, you know. I hear that they're trying to turn Justin Fields into maybe not a quarterback. All right. Hear me out. The Steelers are never a bad team. They're a team that's always in it, right, Gingy? Fair to say?
Somewhat in it.
But are the Steelers ever a team that's really in it, is the question, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. They're in the playoffs, right?
Oh,
they will compete versus the Tennessee Titans. They will compete versus Miami Dolphins. You know what I'm saying? Like tier 2 AFC teams.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're talking about like Ravens in the playoffs, Kansas City, Buffalo, but maybe not anymore. Cleveland, Houston, perhaps at this point, while Buffalo's on the way out, Houston's on the way in.
That's the game that embarrassed me the most last year was that Houston game because we were supposed to be good against rookie quarterbacks, dude.
I mean, look what they did to the Browns in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's a Browns team that, let's be honest, that's a Browns team that ran into a lot of injuries. And hey, you know what? That's
ever
football.
Since we took out
last year, the Steelers' biggest turning point was they didn't have major injuries outside of quarterback, and of course, quarterback for us. Let's be honest, Gingy, quarterback, and I say this every year, is the most important position in football, unless you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, in which case your quarterback doesn't matter because you don't let your quarterback win you games until the fourth quarter and you're losing. So
didn't really have an option there to do it.
I'll disagree. And
look
what Mason Rudolph showed up. If you're saying, okay, you're saying we didn't have an option because of the coordinator, that's fair. I thought you were saying we didn't have an option because we didn't have a quarterback.
We have serviceable quarterbacks, all right? We didn't have no P. Mahomes, okay?
We
had somebody who sometimes didn't blow it. Okay?
We had two guys who I will argue are as talented as Dak Prescott.
Well,
and Dak wins his team games when he's given the opportunity.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves with Dak Prescott.
That's not a far step, in my opinion. Dude. Saying Dak Prescott's not a far step.
That's depending on how you're really ultimately feeling about Dak Prescott nowadays. 2 years ago.
Oh, you mean the future Steelers starter, from what I'm hearing? That Dak Prescott? Oh, yeah. You haven't heard the rumors already that next year Dak Prescott's coming to Pittsburgh?
Well, no thank you.
He
Unless they want to just,
what Tomlin likes.
About what Najee Harris is worth. Well, I'll give you Najee for him.
Yeah, that's fair.
Nah, not really, but I'll take
it. For me, that's fair.
For me, I like that's fair as well. Yeah.
I don't know, Gingy. I mean, this talk, this Najee wanting out stuff, that's why they don't pick up his option. And this comes back to my biggest problem with the Steelers, my biggest problem with Mike Tomlin. And we've talked about it before. Mike Tomlin would rather have the worst player who's willing to do everything Tomlin says than the more talented guy who might, question a little bit or require a little more. It really feels like Mike Tomlin's more about having Mike Tomlin guys than he is about winning important football games at this point of his career. He's like, man, I've won a Super Bowl, I've been to a couple. I don't need to prove anything. And I really feel recently that's what it's been a lot of.
Well, I'll tell you what, I can't tell you how many times over the years. I mean, how hard must it have been to really placate Antonio Brown? Or did he just all of a sudden go that way? I'm pretty sure he was that guy for quite some time.
Vontaze Burfict knocked him into everything that he is now. I am full-heartedly really, sure on that.
It's still, though, isn't that... Okay, even in the early days of Antonio Brown, before the antics, I'm pretty sure he was still that guy, though, especially in the locker room.
My understanding was he was actually pretty darn good about I'm not here saying he was a good locker room guy. Okay, let's clearly state that, but he was a good get along, do what you're told type of guy in the early part of his career. Because remember, the reason he got the contract after Mike Wallace said no was because they felt like he was the ideal soldier to carry on, right? They didn't think he was the more talented receiver, which, well, that kind of tells you something. But they thought he was the ideal guy to carry on because they decided to make him the pick instead of Manny Sanders because the whole idea was Manny Sanders was more of a problem than Antonio Brown.
Wow. Hindsight, huh, Donkey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And no comment.
Wow. That's a hell of a take there, ain't it? Looking at it like 8 years later,
hey, they
like 10 years later.
Definitely picked the more talented wide receiver. Say what you want. They definitely did that.
Picked the wide receiver of the decade. Let's, outside of all of his shenanigans, antics, and illegal behavior. Fantastic football player. Biggest offensive threat we've probably ever had. Really,
very comparable there. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't remember the '70s wide receiver, so I can't say what they were like.
I wasn't present here at that time.
Yeah, in terms of wide receivers I have seen play, he's top 4, top 5 for me for sure. I mean, obviously you got Randy Moss, right? Absolutely has to be towards the top of that list. Megatron has to be towards the top of that list. Even end career Jerry Rice is what I remember. Dude, that dude was silky smooth, even end career. Like you have those type of guys, right? He's probably skill-wise on those levels, but he didn't have the longevity of even... Let's be honest, he didn't even have the longevity of Randy Moss, right? Because he just kind of ran off the rails and let it go and let it end. But if he did, I'm sure he's in that GOAT discussion, man. Right now, I have him in that tier right below those guys. So I'm talking, you want to talk great wide receivers here still. And I'm talking, man, my boy from Pitt, Larry Fitzgerald, right? He's right in that tier for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy, Donkey. We need one badly on the Steelers presently.
Yeah, we do.
We were talking about Najee at running back, right? And locker room chemistry. I was getting to the fact that, this is the reason why we shipped Deontay out undervalued, right? This is the point that I was trying to make earlier. Like, okay, we shipped Deontay out because of these dissents, because of these locker room issues. We don't want guys in there like that. That's why we took Jackson for him, Carolina, right? But now, you don't. I don't know, Donkey. It all don't add up for me, right? So I've seen some good things, and I've seen some good things this offseason, Donkey, and I've seen some things that really, well, I don't know. We'll try to make it a verb that'll make me think that give me a Penix vibe. We'll call it that from now on, right? Like a Why?
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's not looking good. I really am optimistic about a lot of the rebuilding we're doing here, but I can't buy in that we're rebuilding because you don't bring in a Russell Wilson to rebuild, right? You
Maybe you do.
certainly, you
At
certainly,
at Vet Men, you do.
right, but you bring him in to be the instant starter? That doesn't make sense, especially even when it was Kenny Pickett, it didn't make sense. But then when you bring in a first round talent like Justin Fields, it really doesn't make sense. Obviously Kenny Pickett was a first round pick, but Justin Fields is one of them next gen type playmakers, a top 10 type talent in his class. I mean, it doesn't make sense here. You're talking rebuild, but we're still giving big money to guys like Cam Hayward, the Larry Ogunjobi. It feels like this is a team that should be rebuilding and isn't rebuilding. Now, the question we have to get to, Gingy, and maybe this is something we can talk about in this episode to bring it in, is does this team have the potential to compete with those other teams that are at the top notch if that's what we're going? Because it looks like we're all in. I mean, we're not saving any cap. We're not doing any of that. It certainly feels like we're all in. Do we have the ability to compete with Buffalo, to compete with Kansas City, to compete with Baltimore, to compete with, let's just even keep it in the division, Cincinnati, Cleveland? Have we done enough to improve this team that we can say, yeah, we're on that level right now? That's what
Yeah,
I really want to know.
those are really ifs, right? And I've been on these ifs before, right? If Russell Wilson comes in and improves his play from what it was at in Denver, new scenery, new start, new locker room,
What
maybe
it
it
was the
goes
last
better.
3 years in Seattle as well.
Yeah, you see, Donkey, you know what I'm saying? Like that
Yeah,
if,
you catch
Pickens
if you
takes
catch
that next
Rich
step.
Gannon, right? Rich Gannon, 2002, lightning in a bottle for the Raiders, right?
Yeah, if George Pickens makes that next step to become a true number one wide receiver,
If
if
Roman
Artie
Wilson
Smith,
is the stud of the draft.
yeah, if Artie Smith puts together an offense that utilizes all these weapons perfectly effectively, but these are the increasing amount of ifs that come up, Donkey, becomes a less likelihood of overall success.
Yeah, I hear you, and I don't like all these ifs either. Because let's be honest here, that's not how you win Super Bowls is ifs.
It's not ideal. No.
No,
But I mean,
not
I
not
like I
not in the
said,
least.
I see the path. I see the path, right? And maybe even if you get one or two of those ifs come true, that's enough. Okay, if TJ Watt stays healthy for a full season. Let's talk about
Mm-hmm.
that right now, right? That seems to be an
He was
extremely
last year.
essential piece. Yeah, and it led to a playoff berth, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
With
for
him
sure, but
being
it didn't lead to that next gen step, right? That's where the question has to come. That's where the rubber has to hit the road is did we do enough that this isn't just a good season is a first round playoff loss? Cuz last year I talked about it and I said my overall a good season for the Steelers is making the playoffs at 10 and 7, 9 and 8, hoping someone gets hurt and maybe being competitive although I see them getting blown out in the first round. That's what happened. I'm having a hard time feeling how this team's going to be different. And what's weird is there are so many pieces on this offense that if it wasn't Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith, man, I might be talking to you about how the Steelers could have an explosive offense this year, how they are literally one wide receiver away from breaking this thing open. And did the Steelers really miss the boat by trading Deontay Johnson without a secondary option ready? Because it sounds like they were so sure they were going to get Brandon Ayuk or they were going to get Debo Samuel. It sounds like they were so sure on that. That's why they moved on from Deontay. And then nothing materialized. They weren't even able to get the backup option in Cortland Sutton out of Denver. Did the Steelers really miss the boat with this trade? Is what I'm curious about.
yeah, not good. They coulda, right? I've also heard what DK Metcalf being involved in this conversation now.
Seattle's not getting rid of DK Metcalf. If they believed that, they deserve to finish last in the division. Is what I'll say.
Well, that was the other name I've heard floating around, and Jeez
Ironically, the name
Louise.
I heard was his teammate there, right? Lockett is the one that I heard mentioned with it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that's a number one guy, is it? Still?
No.
Number one?
No.
No? I don't think it's so.
That's definitely a number 2 guy.
If there's that if on Pickens again, donkey, just really reaching, I think. If the offensive line develops in the right way and we're able to switch around these tackles interchangeably and everything just goes great, right?
If Broderick Jones hits his potential at left tackle, if Fontanu has no trouble moving to right tackle and is instantly a plug-and-play starter, if one of the 2 rookies is a plug-and-play starter at center, yeah, there's a lot of ifs here. And I feel like when you have this many ifs, the team should be in a rebuild stage, not in an all-in stage. Maybe I'm wrong, but who knows at this point?
I don't know, but we're saddled with some contracts of some guys that I personally think. Listen, production's been great. We're talking about Steelers legends. We're talking about guys who are going to be hanging out as alumni.
Potentially Walter Payton Man of the Year type guys? Is that who we're talking
potentially,
about?
Right? We're talking about guys who've had a hell of a career, but we're talking about guys who sell jerseys and put butts in seats, but not necessarily live up to that value on that paycheck.
I hear
and that
you,
really saddles agree. And that really saddles a team that's trying to be ultra competitive.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I really want to get into here. Is I'm in a different take because I love to look at things just fully objectively, say it how it is. Being a Pirates fan made me that way, and it made me really realize that you can still love a team and not expect them to win a World Series, right? You can still love a team and be excited when they win 81 games because you expected them to have a losing record. And that's how I was with the Pirates. But I've lost a lot of faith in a lot of times when it shows that they don't care. Like claiming, for instance, right now the Pirates are like, oh, look, Paul Skeens is coming up because we haven't scored more than 2 runs in like 30 baseball games. But somehow a pitcher is going to fix the fact that you can't score runs. That's where I feel I'm at with the Steelers right now. I feel like the Steelers are like, look, we got shiny new toys. And I'm like, yeah, but y'all told me last year how the defense wasn't the problem, and that if we had a better offense, our defense would have been best in the league. So in order to fix that, you decided to spend more money on the defense? Like, color me confused, Gingy, but I feel like I'm being told something that doesn't make sense.
Sus. A hair bit sus, donkey.
I don't like it because the Pirates do it, but I expect it because their owner's cheap. And you said something off air that made it really hit home to me in terms of being a Pirates fan. You said, yeah, that's not how you win. That's not how you make a good team, but that's how you run a good business.
Yeah, I did say that. That is, like I said, butts in seats. We're talking about Minkah Fitzpatrick. If you go to those games, donkey, and you take a look around all the Steeler fans in the crowd, there's a certain amount of jerseys out there. It's not everybody on the roster, right?
Mm-hmm.
You see a lot of Fitzpatrick jerseys. You see a lot of Roethlisberger jerseys, Pickett's jerseys now, right? You see some Hayward jerseys out there, and these are the guys, right, that maybe that you hang on to, that you don't necessarily do so for a ultra competitive reason. I could see positive. I could see viability behind that.
Fair enough. Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying.
Not viability for me, looking at the team losing, right? But viability from an ownership standpoint. Just to be clear.
And I think these are things that should be talked about. These are things that a lot of the media doesn't, or just straight up, the stories that all you hear is, oh man, the Steelers are so going all in this year. And every Steelers writer questions when a mainstream media person goes, yeah, they've done a lot, but have they bettered their team at all? Like, yeah, they've added a lot of people, but is their quarterback room actually better? Like, and then the Steelers' answer to that is, we know what we're doing. We have a plan. That's what we're always told. Listen to the plan. Follow the plan. But, Gingy, Why the hell should I believe in a plan that in 13 years has won 3 playoff games, only one of which was against a starting quarterback, and that quarterback wasn't the starter the next season? Like, sorry here, the plan hasn't worked in a long time, and what gets me is the plan hasn't changed. We talked about it. We talk about it at nauseum, and you know that you always defended against me, but the damn standard is the standard. You know how much I hate that. And it's just, is it going to take the fan base turning on what the Steelers do for them to finally switch?
It would probably have to affect a wallet. Yeah, in terms of selling tickets, selling jerseys. We'll see though, Donkey. I tell you what, it's not going to be much longer of 8-8. I mean, it might be, but I'm not talking like that's not going to be super acceptable amongst most people now. It's already not.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Let's get off this take a little. Let's go to other Steelers news. So I've been hearing a lot that maybe the Steelers' big play a middle linebacker wasn't a fluky idea, but in fact was planned because it sounds like Cole Holcomb's recovery from that torn ACL might be more serious than we expected originally. And man, that's such a big loss because he's the first linebacker to step in and look good in this team. I mean, yeah, you can talk about Landon Roberts looking starter capable. He didn't look good, but he looked starter capable, right? Which is a step up from what we've had. They bring in Patrick Queen, who, I have to see before I believe type of thing, right? I'm no longer, I used to be, it with Lyman Sweet, with Chase Claypool, guys like that. I used to be the, no, dude, this guy's going to do it. This guy's going to do it type of guy. And man, you get burned one too many times and you become the, they have to show me something first type of guy. And that's where I'm at now. So until a guy like Patrick Queen steps in, gets away from a great player like Roquan Smith and shows he can be the man, I'm not believing it. I mean, Wilson fell into draft for a reason. The dude looks the part. Can he stay healthy? Are those knees going to be a problem? Can he play at the NFL level where many an athlete in Steelers Nation has failed, a la Devin Bush, right? I have to see these guys first.
I hear you. I hear you, Donkey, on that. But I do see Peyton.
Go ahead.
Wilson on the tape, Donkey. That's just too gnarly. That dude is flying around, launching himself like a missile. People, boom, just blow.
He has good tape, but he's another guy who, if you watch him against big schools, struggles, right? When those linemen get to that second level, he doesn't really separate. And that's part of the reason why he fell as well, as in the bigger games, he had trouble separating. And now, don't get me wrong, the tape's there, the speed's there, the size there. I'm really hyped about this kid, but he's got to show us something in the bigs before we can move on to that. But the real question here, Gingy, was, does this idea that maybe Cole Holcomb's injury is more serious, is that a major concern for this team?
Oh, okay, so I'll tell you what, that's a bit loaded. I think that we need as much depth at that linebacker spot, especially that middle of the field linebacker spot, as we can get. Traditionally, it's been the kind of one of the shadiest parts of our defense is here since we unfortunately lost Shazier, right?
Right. Yep.
So, okay, so he's kind of a journeyman guy who came in last year in the off season and made
he's a
pretty
guy
big
who,
splash.
Yeah, I don't know if journeyman's fair. He only ever played at Washington, and he had a decent career for the Commanders.
Yes. Commanders. I just didn't see him as like a big off-season acquisition. I saw him as a quality starter piece, in a rotation, that type of guy. Definitely over exceeded my expectations, right?
Yeah, me too. I'm with you on that.
Definitely exceeded my expectations. His play on the field was significant. So, yes and no in terms of a big deal. I think that a guy could be in a rotation like that, could be replaceable. But at the same time, given the production and consistency that we've seen, it really necessitates, I think, bringing back a guy like Quan Alexander, even though he got hurt last year.
Fair, yeah.
Just to continue to bring depth at the mid there. I don't necessarily say that about Alexander if we still are able to get Holcomb back, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
yeah, that's my take on it, Donkey. I think it is going to matter.
I fully hear you. There's one last thing that I want to bring up in this episode, and Antonio Brown's always in the news. All of a sudden, now he's all happy, Antonio Brown, and he loves Ben Roethlisberger, and Ben Roethlisberger is his buddy, and he only left the Steelers because he knew they didn't have a chance at winning the Super Bowl. A really harsh take, but I kind of agree with him because, and hear me out on this, since about 2012, there's been this huge shift in the NFL to pure offense, and Mike Tomlin refuses to shift to that style of football, that aggressive style that wins you it. He's a conservative coach. He always will be. And I think that's what holds him back. Does Antonio Brown make a really good point? And obviously he's right in hindsight. But if he stayed, do you think the Steelers would have had a chance at all at any more Super Bowl runs?
After the Le'Veon Bell holdout, Donkey, I don't know if we had the firepower and Ben had it left in his arm.
Mm-hmm. Fair. I don't.
I think that last year Le'Veon Bell on that rookie contract was probably the best shot that the Steelers had at the big one in a minute.
Yeah.
Ben he was still an aging veteran. He wasn't slinging rocks like he was in 2012, right?
Yeah, full on, definitely not.
I think there was still enough there with the leadership and the clutch in the fourth quarter, plus the firepower of Brown and Bell together that could have competed there. But beyond that, I think Antonio might have been right. He saw an aging Ben Roethlisberger on a continued contract and a rebuild coming.
Yeah, I think he's 100% right. That's what I'll say. I think he for sure made the right choice there.
Choice, wrong choice for his career.
Well, I meant the right choice.
He made the wrong choice.
Right. That's fair to say.
He made.
What I meant by right choice was he made the call that the Steelers didn't have a chance at the Super Bowl, and I think he was 100% right on that.
I think he could have, had a greater career in the NFL, even if it wouldn't have been Super Bowl. It still would have been with him though. Super Bowl contention was in place. I think that unfortunately Ben was the leader of that team, and Antonio, I think, covered a lot of ground that. I think he covered up a lot of things that Ben Roethlisberger might have been efficient in.
Right. Antonio Brown makes quarterbacks look good, right?
Yeah. I think that could have been the deal, but I don't think near the end there, it didn't seem like Antonio had that type of attitude no more. That was one thing I was talking to you about earlier too, in terms of the Antonio Brown progression. Was he always that guy? Did we just not know? Did he progressively kind of turn into this guy? I never really knew.
Right. Yeah, I mean, those are all fair questions to ask. I just wanted to bring it up because, Antonio had to put his name out there, so I had to do a little talking about it.
He needs to stay still relevant. And hey, he's still in recent enough history that I think that it is relevant to talk about. It's quite a controversial figure, right? Because in a very struggling offense, he's kind of a jerk, and he doesn't necessarily, he's not necessarily loyal to the team that was loyal to him for quite some time. But it's got some hot takes there, Donkey. Got some hot takes.
For sure. That's what off-season talk is about, man. Just bring up some stuff, see what's going to stick, see what we really believe.
He's got some hot takes out there, and I don't know. I still think
Brown
that
is the off-season you want. All right.
I still think that the emergence of T.J. Watt on the other end, and Ben and Antonio on the other side, if he stays sane, I think they got a better shot, and I think they still got a shot. So I don't know if I 100% in thinking about that agree with him.
That's fair. You don't have to.
It depends on whatever he considers his contribution going to be during that time, right? If he was continuing to progress as the guy, right? Then
you also have to remember this is a part of it that maybe is a little more interesting to talk about fully. This part of his career that we're talking about is when Mike Tomlin really started to take coaching control, right? Like we're getting rid of even Todd Haley's and just getting yes men for Mike Tomlin is the way it felt. Like it was nothing but yes men coming in. Did Antonio Brown see the writing on the wall? I think that's a fair question to have about this time frame of Steeler history.
Yeah, it makes sense. In hindsight, right, it kind of turned out that way, but having, being able to understand or what goes on in that locker room or what he knew at that time, that's pretty unknown.
Yeah, fair to say.
Yeah. Nope, always worth talking about. Always worth kind of bringing that up, though.
Antonio Brown is the type of offseason talk you want because he's a polarizing image, and that's what you want to talk about in these times and eras, I guess we can say. Gingy, that's really what I wanted to get into. I thought there were some good takes there. I really like the position we're going. I'm confused on whether I should be really excited about the Steelers right now or really disappointed in the Steelers because it feels like we're building two completely different things at the same time and not sure which one we want to do. Anything you really want to talk about here?
No, I think that about wraps it up for me. We got about 3.5 solid months to talk about it and figure it out, Donkey, before we see anything.
Rookie mini camp partaking. We might have new players to talk about, some new guys joining in, maybe a new quarterback, former Pitt quarterback who they never should have picked up from Boston College. Phil Jurkovich is trying out as a tight end. There could be some fun stuff to talk about next week, Gingy, and we might even have Laskers here to get his take on what has happened so far.
You're gonna drag Laskers back into this.
Yeah, kicking and screaming, dude. I will drag his ass kicking and screaming, all right? Gingy, any shout outs you want to give?
Nonsensical. Nonsensical. Gingy, don't do that.
That's fair. I don't know if I started it off right this time because me and Gingy had such a long talk before, but this is Nonsensical Steelers talk. It is the offseason. It is that time. My shout out's going to be Gingy. This is the longest you've ever hanged in the offseason. I hope it continues. So my shout out's purely to you because without your polarizing opposite view of mine, this show would not be what it is. So just want to put that shout out there and give out my appreciation.
Woot woot.
I guess that's time. I gotta let you know I'm the Viking Donkey. That's Viking_Donkey on Twitch and Twitter. Your daily dose of Donkey with Ginger is a YouTube channel where you get all this fun, nonsensical contact. Leave us a like, follow, comment, tell us what you think is good about this time of year. Tell us what you think is bad. And Gingy, send them off.
What's bad? Less football. What's good? Steelers. Wave them if you got them.